So school starts here in Illinois in less than a month, believe it or not. There's some districts that start up like the second week of August. Of course, we've got the Illinois State Fair here in the Springfield area, which is kind of like the last big outing for families before kids have to get back into school. And one of the things that still is yet to be really made explicitly clear is what kind of COVID-19 protocols are there going to be from top down. If you remember last year, there was the whole issue of schools were going to make their own decisions, and then all of a sudden, like very short order, the state said, okay, no, we're going to mandate masks and exclusion policies for kids who are close contacts to COVID-19, so it caused some chaos and lots of lawsuits and lots of discontent about the whole process. But something else that's happening now is this idea of new sex ed standards. And just some background here. Last year, state lawmakers approved Senate Bill 818 that ultimately says that if a school is going to teach sex ed, they have to follow national sex education standards. And these standards from a variety of groups that have come together. It's not from the federal government. It's from nonprofits, but it's the National Sex Education Standards from a group that put these standards together, and it goes into a lot of detail about the different levels that kids are to learn, and we'll talk about that. But there's a lot of pushback from districts that aren't gonna have this as their standard moving forward. I want to hear from you at 217-629-7970. That's the phone number here, live and local on WMAY, and you can chime in. Should your school districts do these new standards? Do you know what the standards are? Have you poked around and asked your school representatives on your public school board what they're going to be doing about this? Because there's been a lot of back and forth, and in particular, you have State Representative Kathleen Willis, who is a Democrat from the northern part of the state. She was behind legislation that wanted sex ed curriculum to be updated and mandated in schools, including for people rather young and people who are in kindergarten. You start off with some type of sex ed curriculum. Here's Kathleen Willis talking a little bit about what she's looking for with the bill that she ultimately did get passed, the state legislature.
And it is not too early to start teaching children as young as preschool and definitely by kindergartner about healthy relationships.
So when it comes to that idea of healthy relationships, you've got the different types of grades and curriculum that are going to be laid out. And for instance, for K through 12, the sex ed standard says that they're going to be teaching consent and healthy relationships. All right, so that's K through 12, K through second grade. They'll be teaching consent and healthy relationships. And you've got a variety of other standards that are laid out here from the national sex ed standards that are put out there. But K through 12, they'll learn about autonomy and physiology. Then you get further down into the list, 3 through 5. You'll be teaching a variety of things. Recall the human reproductive system. By the end of grade 5, explain physical, social, and emotional changes that occur during puberty. Describe how puberty prepares humans. I mean, some of this seems pretty typical and standardized, but when you get further down into it, there are some questions as to, is this too graphic of a curriculum? Because it also goes into some things that parents may not want their students to have to learn about. 217-629-7970. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Hey, morning, Bishop.
Hey.
As a parent of a child that's probably going to be, getting to that age, preteen, I really don't want, and I don't think that teachers should be talking to children about sex. I think that should be the parents' job. Everybody has different beliefs, especially when there's a lot of agenda behind a lot of this sex ed. That may not necessarily agree, parents may not agree with. It's also just very creepy to have grown adults talking to 5, 6-year-old children about sex. That just seems way too young to be talking about that kind of stuff.
Well, but it's not just about sex and about your body and appropriate or inappropriate touching. If you see some of these standards, it also talks about gender expression and gender identity across the spectrum, and that's something that they're wanting to teach. Again, in certain grades 3 through 5, they'll explain gender expression and gender identity that exist along a spectrum. And this is obviously when you get into gender studies, I'm curious if they're going to be teaching everything from, the thems and the z's and the zays. And I don't know if you know all the different pronouns that there are, but these are obviously some questionable things that people in some areas just don't want. And in particular, State Representative Adam Niemerg, a Republican from downstate, he shared some of his concerns that he has about these sex ed standards being implemented in certain areas of the state.
Entire school districts can opt out of this program. They can so choose to do that. They have complete local control on this matter.
And they do. They do have complete local control. And Awake Illinois put together a spreadsheet that shows quite a bit of the different schools that are opting in or opting out of the national sex ed standards. And of course, a lot of these school districts, some of the larger ones, they're opting into it. But you've got schools, and let's check out this spreadsheet of the 850 different school districts that there are. That Awake Illinois has tracked here. And I'm getting all the way down to Sangamon County. If you're watching online, you can join us. Some of the different schools that have opted out. You've got, Ball Chatham, New Berlin, Pawnee, Pleasant Plains, Riverton, Rochester, Tri-City, Williamsville. Those are the schools in Sangamon County that have opted out. We have yet to hear about Auburn Community School, and Awake Illinois also has yet to see if Springfield schools are going to be doing the sex ed standards. 217-629-7970. That's the phone number here. Live and local, and your thoughts. Should Springfield District 186, which has not yet responded, according to Awake Illinois, should they opt out of the sex ed standards? Because one of the things here is it's an issue of if the school is going to teach sex ed, they have to comply with these standards. Now, another big question remains is what's the Illinois State Board of Education going to lay out? And they're meeting in August. They don't have a meeting this month. Traditionally, they don't have meetings in July. Apparently, according to even last year, I looked and there was no monthly meeting in July for the State Board of Education, but they will have a meeting in August. And that'll likely provide a little bit more context to this. But just to kind of go back again to some of the various things that are going to be laid out here in these sex ed standards. Interpersonal violence will be taught from up to 5th grade. In grade 6, you talk more about anatomy and physiology and puberty, gender identity and expression, demonstrate ways to communicate respectively with and about people, all gender identities, sexual orientation and identity, demonstrate ways to communicate respectfully. Then in 6th through 8th grade, you'll be learning about sex ed health. And a variety of different things, develop a plan to eliminate and reduce the unwanted pregnancy and STDs, explain there are many methods of short and long-term contraception, lists of different types of contraception, then also sexual health. It goes on further to talk about signs and symptoms or lack thereof of potential impacts of STDs, discuss current biomedical approaches to preventing STDs, describe state and federal laws related to minors' access to sexual health care. So they'll be teaching about access to abortion and different types of pregnancy prevention methods. Also talks about racism in sex ed, which is interesting to see that pop up. But also by the end of 8th grade, students should be able to compare and contrast the characteristics of healthy and unhealthy relationships. A lot of this seems fine, but then when you get further into some of it, it does raise questions as to is this really just a kind of very straightforward here's your body, here's how it works, or is there more of kind of a way to try to shape culture in a way when it comes to the ideas of gender spectrum and even working racism into sex ed. And that's one thing that Awake Illinois has tried to highlight, saying that this is an activist agenda. It's not a biological education agenda. So we'll see how far this goes and just exactly what transpires. Of course, you can always chime in, 217-629-7970, or you can email bishoponair@gmail.com. Find me online, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and we can connect that way.